Hey guys, Carlise here with the Shadow Box. I am your grief and trauma coach and your shadow work guide. Today with me, I have Kelci Jager. Kelci is a registered nurse. She is also a grief coach and a life coach. And she is also a best time seller as well. And she has a couple of books that's under her belt. She has A Million Miracles and One That Never Came. And I'm really interested in knowing about that particular book. Let's see. So she is also the owner of Rise with Grief. So, Kelci, go ahead and just give us a little bit more information about yourself and bring us into your world.
Yeah. First, Carlise, thank you for having me um, on your podcast here today. It's an honor to be here with you. I did not choose this path to be in the grief world. If you would have told me 5 years ago that this is where I would be, I would think that you were crazy.
Yeah.
Um, but life had other plans, and um, I experienced sudden loss and life altering events that no longer was grief kind of this obscure thing. It was no longer my life became the thing that people looked at and said, "Oh, that's just horrible."
Yeah.
So let me give you a little bit of background exactly what happened. Um, in 2020, in the middle of COVID, we had recently relocated from Southern California to Florida, my husband and our four sons. And um, we were, riding out COVID in our home in our new home in Florida. And one night, our two oldest boys were in a motor vehicle accident.
Mm.
And as a result of that motor vehicle accident, our second oldest son suffered from severe traumatic injuries to his body that required, multiple surgeries and lots of rehab and whatnot. And our oldest son, who was also in the accident, he suffered a head injury in that accident. And so in the emergency room, the doctors did a CT scan to see the extent of his injuries. And it was at that time they discovered that he had a brain tumor that we were not aware of.
Yeah.
So, as you can imagine, it's the middle of COVID. It's August 2020. I'm in the hospital alone because my husband was at home with our two younger kids, and it was COVID. So, they only allowed one parent there. And
Right.
then all these like things are happening, and just kind of it's like when you see it's when time stands still and you're
Yeah.
just kind of like seeing the world around you go in slow motion, and it's kind of like an out of body experience. You disassociate, and that's what happened. I was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
That was really where my grief and trauma journey started.
Okay.
So that was in August of 2020. And then fast forward to January of 2021. And it's January 2nd of 2021. And my husband ended up in the emergency room.
Okay.
And he did not come home from the hospital. He was admitted. And after a series of tests and just so many doctors trying to figure out what was going on with him. After about 7 days in the hospital, we were given a diagnosis finally, and he had an aggressive form of leukemia. So he had a type of blood cancer.
Okay.
And this coming on the heels of my boy's accident, my son brain tumor, as you can imagine, was a lot for me. And
Yeah.
that is where my journey started in the
Okay.
grief world.
Okay. Now, what a different dynamic of grief, right? So you have your sons that have been in an accident, they're both kind of losing parts of themselves that they were accustomed to. They're young men. You
Mhm.
are their mother, and you're like my babies, right? My little
Yes.
boys.
Yes.
And you're grieving that part of them that feels like that you bore,
Mhm.
that you bore, and you're grieving that part of them that you're like, what is their future going to look like?
Mhm.
So you're grieving their future ahead of time, not knowing what's really going to come about with it. And then you come and you have your husband. And I can only imagine you're grieving your children, and then you're kind of grieving your husband because you don't know what's going on. And then he eventually passes away. Talk to me out of that space of the two differing griefs, and how did you navigate that while in COVID?
Oh my gosh, it was impossibly hard. And I honestly, Carlise, look back and I'm like, I don't know how I got through that. I will
Yeah.
tell you one thing, I didn't get through it alone. I had earthly angels and heavenly angels by my side that helped me every step of the way, because there's no way I could have gotten through that alone. But yeah, you're right. It was my children absolutely grieving their loss of safety and security and their childhood. And suddenly they couldn't do all the things that they loved to do, because they were recovering from this really traumatic thing. And thankfully, um, my son that had the brain tumor, he had immediately had surgery to have the brain tumor removed. And we didn't know if it was cancerous or not. And thankfully, it was benign. And the
Yeah.
neurosurgeon was able to remove the entire tumor. So
Oh,
he did
good.
not have to go through any type of chemo or radiation. Um, but he did have extensive brain surgery. And he was in an accident and had a traumatic brain injury. So it was like he was dealing with recovering from that. His brother, my other son, was dealing with recovering with, he had multiple broken bones, had to road rash up and down his body, had to go to PT for months and months. That was a whole separate monster. And
Right.
then my husband, and I was just like, oh my gosh, my husband was my rock through the whole
Yeah.
time with my sons. He's my partner. He is the one that I turn to when I feel like everything's falling apart. He's the one that tells me that everything's going to be okay when I don't think everything's going to be okay. And now all of a sudden
Right.
that's been ripped from me too. And
Right.
I I really spiraled in the beginning after my husband's diagnosis. I was definitely in the darkest place I've ever been in my entire life. And
Yeah.
my book, A Million Miracles and the One That Never Came, is about that experience. It's about that experience. It starts off with um, the accident, and then it jumps right into my husband going into the hospital. And
Yeah.
it is my personal journal entries. That was one thing that I did to help me cope through that time. Was I journaled and I kept record of everything, and I wrote down my feelings, because as a caregiver, especially with these things on top of each other, um,
Mhm.
I was going through a lot personally, but I put
Yeah.
myself on the back burner. I was trying to survive. I was doing everything I could for my husband and my kids. And I was not even, I wouldn't even say I was an afterthought. I didn't think about myself at all.
Yeah.
And but that is one thing that I did for myself, was that I journaled. And in those journals, I was honest, because I wasn't the one that had cancer. I wasn't the one fighting for my life. So I didn't feel like I was valid in my grief. I didn't feel like I
Mm.
was valid in expressing the trauma and the hardship that I was enduring. Because after all, I'm not the one in the hospital bed. I'm not the
Right.
one that's physically suffering, but I could share that in my journal.
Yeah.
And so that really helped me. I did kind of shift my mindset. In the beginning, like I said, I was not okay. I completely fell apart. I had a total nervous breakdown. And I'd never had a nervous breakdown before. I had always prided myself on being strong and capable, and I've got this, I can do hard things. I couldn't do this, at least not on my own. And I had a nervous breakdown, and then I was really on this spiral of just like, I don't know how to do this. This is so scary. All the what ifs. My fear brain really took over. And
Yeah.
within that fear brain mindset, I got sucked into this victim mindset of like, woe is me. And
Yeah.
that was not empowering. That was
Yeah.
not
And
gonna.
no, go ahead, because it's like you had no room to process anything that you
Mhm.
experienced. You
No.
were hit back to back, and everything that you were hit with had long standing things that were attached to it. So
Yes.
yes, your kids had gotten into their accident and now they're in PT, they're doing all these things, but they're still recovering. So
Yes.
here you are trying to jump back from that and trying to then navigate, okay, my husband's not feeling quite well, what's going on with him?
Hmm.
And then he ends up in the hospital.
Hmm.
Your brain was totally hijacked.
Yes.
That's literally what you call a hijack.
Yes. There was one day early on, it was in January, where Colin was in one hospital. Colin's my husband. Colin was in one hospital across town. And then across the other side of town, my kids were at the children's hospital. Luca was having another surgery. So I was there with him.
Mhm.
And Ian was having another MRI to see if the brain tumor was coming back, and if it was
Yeah.
coming back as cancer. And so you can imagine, here I am. My husband was just diagnosed with leukemia.
Yeah.
My son is in surgery, and my other son is having his first MRI post surgery to see if
Mhm.
his brain tumor has come back. And if it has, there's a good chance it's cancer. This is what I'm being told. And so that's why I say, I don't know how I got through that. I couldn't get through that on my own. But I
Well,
really got sucked into that victim mindset, and I couldn't do the things that I needed to do. Like if I
yeah.
wasn't stayed in that victim mindset by the time my kids, that day I just explained, where my husband was in the hospital and one's in surgery and the other kid is having a brain MRI, I wouldn't have been, I couldn't get out of bed when I was in that victim mindset. It was so disempowering. And I was like, Kelci, this is not going to work. Like, you are not going to be able to get through this. You will not survive. I could not
Yeah.
survive in that place. It was literally killing me.
Yeah.
And so the way I crawled out of that was very, very slowly, one step at a time. But I had this motto, and I talk about this in my book, where I started
Mhm.
to look for the light. And my
Yeah.
world was so dark. And that darkness was so suffocating.
Yeah.
But there
And
was also, go ahead.
before we get to the light, because there was a space and time in there that your husband was diagnosed and then he passed away. So how long did you have in between that time? Was it just within 7 days?
Oh, no, no, no. That was 18 months.
18 months.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And
Yeah,
then he
from the
got
time
sick.
of diagnosis to the time he passed
Yeah.
away was 18 months.
Okay. So in that process, when the children were going through what they were going through, did you and your husband have a conversation about, hey, this is not going to turn out so well for me? This is what, I want the plans to be. This is kind of how I want to prepare you for my demise? Did you guys have that conversation?
No, because he was not diagnosed terminally. He
Mm,
was given a very poor prognosis. He was given a chance of 30% of surviving the first year. But you can't go into a cancer diagnosis with, oh, my prognosis is 30%, so I guess I'm going to die.
yeah,
You can't do that. And that's not the
yeah,
kind of people we are. And so he
yeah,
was 100% confident that he was going to beat this. So no, we
yeah.
never had that conversation because he held on to so much hope and fought
Hmm.
so hard that he didn't actually finally accept that he was going to not make it, that he was not going to be healed in this life until the day before he passed away. And it was that
Yeah,
morning that the doctors came in and finally said, they hadn't said this to us before. They
yeah,
finally said, there is nothing more that we can do. And so, no, we had never had that conversation. And about 2 weeks before he passed away, I'm an RN. I saw the writing on the wall,
yeah,
but I also was hopeful and holding on to, that glimmer. He had so many miracles. That's why the name of my book is A Million Miracles. And the one
yeah,
that never came, because he had so many miracles. The doctors called him the comeback kid. And so I was like, okay, well, we're going to get another one. And he was so confident.
yeah,
But I did see the writing on the wall, and I did see that, I wasn't like, oh, for sure, because the doctors were telling
right,
us, don't give up hope. There's still a chance. It's
yeah,
not looking great, but there's still a chance.
yeah,
But I did ask him about 2 weeks before he passed away. I tried to have a conversation like that with him. And he
yeah.
actually got very upset with me and
Hmm.
said, I'm not going to talk about this because I am not going anywhere.
Okay,
And so I just dropped it.
okay. In hindsight, how do you think that conversation would have prepared you? And of course, that's a horrible word to use, but how do you think that conversation would have prepared you for the outcome?
It would not have prepared me.
Okay.
Because how do you prepare for the love of your life to be gone?
Yeah. Do you think that it would have given you time to just kind of put some things, even acceptance, kind of in order in your heart and in your mind, like this is what we're facing?
No,
No.
because I was not accepting of
Got it.
him passing away. I
Yeah.
was we were both like um we were both so hopeful. And again, like I said, I am an RN. I saw the writing on the wall. I
Yeah.
knew with each day that it got closer to the day that he actually passed that it was looking more and more grim.
Got it.
But in order to do the things that I had to do, I couldn't go there.
Mm.
I couldn't go to, I had to hold on to that hope. That was
Yeah.
my lifeline, which is why I said I got through that by looking for the light.
Yeah.
Because that light, like I said, that darkness was so suffocating. It felt like I couldn't breathe most days.
Yeah.
And it was very easy to get just sucked into the, oh, woe is me, all look at all that's wrong and all that we've lost. And that would have been valid. We lost
Yeah.
so much, we went through so much in such a short amount of time. But what does that give me? What does that serve me? And it
Yeah.
wasn't that I dismissed all of that, but I didn't focus on that. I focused on the light because there were, like I said, a million miracles. And each
Yeah.
of those little miracles was a glimmer of light. And that's what I held on to. And that light was my anchor. And that is how I
Yeah.
got through I got through the impossible by doing that. And that's
Yeah.
what I continue to do because it's still extremely hard on the other side. You know, people think that the hardest thing was the day he died. And don't get me wrong, that was absolutely gut-wrenching. But to now live on the other side of that, now live on the other side of worrying about him for 559 days, that's how many days he struggled, that he was going to, that he might not live. And now to live on the other side of that, that is my actual reality.
Right.
It's excruciating.
In the excruciating portion of it, would you give me a percentage of, if you even can, because this is kind of a crazy question, a percentage of sadness and anger? Or what, does one outweigh the other, or do you feel like they're balanced?
Um, I wouldn't say I have a lot of anger.
Okay.
I would say that it's mostly sadness. I don't think I have anger. I have a lot of sadness.
Yeah.
Some things, you know, to anger is a secondary emotion, and
Hmm.
anger is rooted in pain or fear. And I just have a lot of pain. And there's a little
Yeah.
bit of fear there too, but I wouldn't say that there's anger,
Yeah.
because who am I going to be angry at? I
Right.
don't, you know, a lot of people are, they may be angry at God, and I was angry at God in the beginning, and I talk about that in my book.
Hmm.
When I was in that dark hole, I was really angry with God. Like, how can you let this happen to us? If you loved me, why would you let this happen?
Yeah.
And but I've worked through all of that, and I don't believe that God did this to us. He did let
Hmm.
it happen, yes. Um, but if everybody got a miracle, then it wouldn't be a miracle.
Yeah.
And I don't understand his reasons. But when I fight my reality, then I lose 100% of the time. So I
Yeah.
don't have anger.
Yeah. How would you say, or when was that moment when you let God come in and soothe you in that space where you were like, okay, God?
Yeah, I think it was when I shifted, because I was really angry and I was demanding in the beginning when I was in that dark place, demanding that he answer my prayers, demanding that he, you know, I was bargaining, I was angry, I was doing all the things. Um, and when he wasn't answering my prayers the way that I was demanding him to, that I wanted him to,
Hmm.
um, I couldn't see his hand.
Yeah.
And when I let go of the things that I couldn't control, which were so many things that I was trying to hold on to, when I let go of those things, and I want to preface this with that is not easy to do, but it's possible, and it takes intentional work. But when I let go of the things I couldn't control and I accepted his will, acceptance doesn't mean that you like it,
Hmm.
but I accepted, like, I am still wishing and praying and hoping that you will heal him in this life, but also trusting that you've got me and you've got him and you've got our family, no matter what the outcome. And when
Yeah.
I did that, then I could start to feel and see his hand, which
Yeah.
again was the light.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that when we had spoken previously, you were saying that also community was big for you as well in
Yes.
that process of healing. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So like I said, I couldn't go through this alone. There's there's no way that I could have carried that grief and trauma alone. So I,
Hmm.
number one, had to allow people to help me. And that's hard. That's hard for a lot of people. We don't like, it requires us to be vulnerable. It requires us to
Right.
give up control. And I don't like to do any of those things. Um, but when you're drowning and someone is offering you a lifeline, and your options are, you're going to go underwater or you take
Hmm.
their hand, then you take their hand. And so that,
Yeah.
you know, that community physical community surrounding me with like the day to day, helping me with my kids and the house and all those things was huge. Then there's the community of other people that are going through similar things as you.
Mhm.
Um, I connected with other women through social media that whose husbands were also fighting for their lives.
Yeah.
And there's this sense of comfort in knowing that you're not alone and
Right.
that the things that you're experiencing, I would write in my journal things, but I could also be honest with them with how I was
Yeah.
feeling because I knew they felt the same way. And then I would be like, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm not a horrible wife. I'm not broken.
Yeah.
And we as humans, we need connection, and
Mhm.
connection is healing. It's very, very hard to heal in isolation.
Yeah. Yeah. How how did you allow them? Were there only so we're talking about the community that is online or the groups that you have, and then you have the community. Did that community consist of like family and friends, or was it just family? What was that community in person like?
So that's a good question. Remember, we had moved from California to Florida right before all this happened. And
Hmm.
so all our family was on the West Coast. Most of our family was still in California. We had no family in Florida, zero. Um, so we relied heavily on our neighbors, our friends that we had made, our church community out here. Um, and like I said, we had just moved. We hadn't been here very long. So
Yeah.
it wasn't like we had these lifelong friends that we were like, hey,
Right.
we need help. And it was in the middle of COVID. So it wasn't easy for our family to come from California to Florida to help us. In fact, my mom couldn't even come out for like over a year.
Yeah.
And Colin's mom came pretty quickly after his diagnosis, but she was not able to come when the boys had their accident or Ian had a brain tumor. And none of the rest of our family really could come because of COVID.
Yeah.
And so we were forced to rely on those around us. And I will say, like I said, it's very hard to be vulnerable and let go of
Mhm.
control, but it also is so connecting.
Yeah.
And you can get really close with someone very fast
Yeah.
when you allow them to serve you in that way.
Yeah. And really just putting your guard down,
Yeah.
putting your guard down. And that is where God was really showing you his hand, even though you couldn't see it at that time. But it's like, I definitely know that I have to get you through this. And I
Mhm.
know that I'm really the only one that's going to be here with you in the nighttime, in the crying, in in your head, even, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so allowing God to really just come in and it's reminds me, I don't know if I said this when we had our meeting, but it reminds me of that it's a story that they tell, and they used to always have like a poster of it, but it's about when you only see one set of footsteps, you know that it was God
Yes.
carrying you.
Footsteps in the sand.
Yes, that's
Yes.
what it reminds me of, and that is exactly what was going on with you
Mhm.
at that time.
Absolutely. Yes, that is
Yeah.
100% exactly what it was, and that's exactly what my mindset too was. Like, where
Yeah.
are you? Here I am, like, are the heavens silent?
Hmm.
And it wasn't until I kind of, you know, softened my heart a little and stopped having a tantrum
Yeah.
that God was like, I was here all along.
Yeah. How did you and your boys navigate your grieving in the home? Because it was only the four of you, right? Now, do you have all boys or do you have
I have
a
all boys. I
daughter?
have we have 4 sons. So
Four sons.
yeah.
Okay.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
So okay, so the five of you, how did you guys navigate the grief in the home?
Oh gosh. In the early days, it was rough because I did not know how to do this. I did not know how to carry my grief. I did not have the coping tools. And, I went straight into grief therapy. I dove into grief books. I started the grief groups. I did all the things.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't giving me everything that I needed. And I just felt so lost. And it was really, really rough. It was really rough. I tried my best to keep things as normal as possible for the children.
Hmm.
Um, we really leaned on our faith and really leaned into the belief that their dad was still there present with us. We just couldn't see him. And that definitely brought comfort and helped. But I think something that people get confused is that your faith, while it can bring comfort, it doesn't erase the grief. It doesn't erase the pain. It's not like, oh, well, he's still with you and you'll see him again. And it's like, oh, okay, fine. Then I'm okay with his
Yeah.
separation. Like, no,
Yeah.
pain is
No.
still so overwhelming. And it's, no one told me how much grief felt like fear.
Oh, yeah.
And my nervous system was just so shocked and just so dysregulated. I just was constantly in this fight or flight, you know, like
Yeah.
my nervous system was constantly thinking that I was being chased in the woods by a crazy person with like a knife. And
Hmm.
no one explained that to me. And so I kind of didn't really know what to do with that. Um,
Right.
until I figured it out. But in the beginning, it was rough.
Yeah. And, that's one of those byproducts of grief too, or loss, especially when it's very close to you, of you stay in that fight or flight, especially when you have children, because the world is so uncertain. And you already experienced that with the accident. You didn't wake up in the morning saying, oh, my kids could possibly get into an accident, but it happened, right? And so now you
Mm-hmm.
still have your children. You still know the world is uncertain. You know that no one's really in control. And so you stay in that heightened alert state
Yes.
because you want to make sure that your children are okay, and
Yes.
then let you have a slight headache and you're wondering, am I okay? And so
Absolutely.
people don't talk about that aspect of losing someone that keeps you in an anxious state, because you
Mm-hmm.
are fearful, because death has become extremely real to you because it came
Yes.
right to your home and
Yes.
at your front door.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I am so envious of the Kelsey before all of this happened
Mhm.
because I was so naive. And I would see, of course, tragedies and things, and I would feel compassionate and sad, and try to help in any ways that I could. But in my mind, it was like that always happened to other people,
Yeah.
and now I became other people,
Yeah.
and it was like, wait, what? And so
Yeah.
yeah, it took that trauma runs deep.
Yeah.
And I still have moments or things where, someone gets a fever, or I ended up in the hospital 2 weeks ago with kidney stones. And, that really, I knew I was going to be fine, but that really scared the children.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, mom's in the hospital. What does that mean? Is she going to be okay? And yeah, it's still 3 years later, and it's been almost 5 years since the accident, it's still rearing its ugly head and affecting us.
Definitely. And I will say that it kind of always will. That's one of those triggers that will never go away. And it's learning how to kind of ride it and navigate it and take the day for what it is, take it for what it is. So
Absolutely.
when you have a headache, or when you have something that you have to go to the hospital with, the doctors are saying, you have a kidney stone. Your head wants to say, well, is that stone cancerous, or are they
Yes.
sure? Are they?
Yep.
So it's like staying in that present moment and saying, at this time, I am okay. In this
Yes.
space, I am okay. And it's hard to hone it in when oh, the possibilities, too many
Yes.
possibilities out there, right? A
Absolutely.
question I have for your boys, because they're boys and they're experiencing grief in a different way than you are, and behaviors may change, fear may struck into them. How did you handle the changes that were happening with your boys as they were grieving? Were you even able to, did you have the capacity for it?
Um, I don't think I had the capacity for it, but I did the best that I could. We'll say
Yeah.
that. But looking back, I did the best that I could. Did I do it perfectly? Absolutely not. Did I have the tools and the capacity? No, I didn't. But also, I know them better than anybody. They're my
Yeah.
kids. And so I knew what they needed. And each one of them grieved in a different way and needed things differently. And I just was very, very, very intentional in meeting my kids where they were and
Awesome.
not pressuring them or forcing them to talk about it or do anything, but I remained open.
Yeah.
And I also allowed them to see me grieve. And a lot
Yeah.
of parents will say, well, I hide in my closet because I don't want to let my kids see me crying or upset because then it upsets them. And I totally get that. I do. And of course, you don't want to be like so out of control that it scares
Yeah.
your kids. But it is very important to allow your kids to see you grieving and to see you sad and to see you crying and to see you processing all of that, because you are setting the example for them
Yeah.
on how to do this. And you let them
Yeah.
see that and you be honest and vulnerable with them. And then you also let them see how you pick yourself up and
Mhm.
continue moving forward. Because
Yeah.
again, they're watching you and you are setting the example and for them.
Yeah,
And
and they're
so
scared because they don't know
absolutely.
no one has been in this position anymore. And they know that mom is fragile. They know the nature of the atmosphere as it was when dad was there,
Mhm.
and so they're like, okay, now dad is gone. How is mom really going to, is she going to be okay? Is she going to be able to
Mhm.
raise us all? Is she going to be, all these questions. And we think that kids are more naive than what they are. They may not speak it as much as an adult would, but they have these questions going on. And I'm pretty sure they were, in their bedroom huddled up together, like, I don't know, is mom going to be okay?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and feeling that they have to come in and now protect,
Yeah.
especially as boys, you know.
Yes.
One of the things that we talked about, which I really want you to dive into, because this helped you come out of that aspect of the victimhood. It helped you come out of just getting into an understanding of yourself post husband,
Mhm.
post the identity of of things just changing, right?
Mhm.
And so when you said, I did the work,
Mhm.
tell me what that looked like for you. What did that consist of?
So our tendency is to run away from pain. Like
Mhm.
either we run from it, we push it down, we numb it. And I knew very early on because I, had dove into the grief books and all the things that I needed to face the pain instead of numbing it. And that doesn't mean that I just forced myself into sufferance and sat in it all day and had a pity party 24/7. But when it came up, grief comes in waves. And when that wave came, I didn't it's scary, especially the beginning when you don't know how to deal with it. It's so scary. And my instinct was to run from it, but I didn't. I allowed myself to feel it and I allowed myself to process it and let that grief wave wash over me. I got very curious about my thoughts. I learned to recognize my triggers. I learned to acknowledge and identify my patterns. And in doing the work, I was choosing to rebuild. I got to, like, in the beginning, I just needed to survive. And so I was just like, I'm just trying to keep my head above water and I just have to survive. And I did that. And then I kind of hit like what I call a grief plateau where I was like, okay, well, I'm surviving, I'm getting all the things done. I'm paying the mortgage, the bills, I'm getting the kids to school, I'm getting out of bed. Like, I can do all the things, but I wasn't feeling that spark that
Yeah.
makes you feel alive was missing.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to continue to live like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew because it'd been like 6 months in, and I was like, okay, well, it's not just going to come back on its own.
Yeah.
It's not just going to organically happen. I have to actively do the work and be intentional to create it, to get that spark back so that I can
Yeah.
go from just surviving to thriving.
Yeah. Okay. And once you noticed that you were able to start thriving, what did that thriving look like for you?
I felt peace. I felt hope for the future and being able to live with joy like I had before. Colin and I built a beautiful, beautiful life, and that life
Mhm.
burned to the ground with his death.
Yeah.
And I had hope that I could, and not only when I got to the thriving point, not only hope, I was doing it. I was beginning
Yeah.
to rebuild that beautiful life. And it wasn't, and it's still not back to where it was,
Mhm.
but I can see it and I can feel it and it's tangible now.
Right.
Um, and then I also found my purpose and my ability to help others and
Yeah.
find purpose in my pain, which it's so weird for me to say, but like it just fills me with that spark ignites in me when
Hmm.
I see that shift in other people who are trying to endure this life after loss. When I can, my clients, when I'm working with them and I can see that shift
Yeah.
where that hope comes back.
Right.
And it's just it just makes me feel so much joy when I
Yeah.
can see that.
Yeah. Because you see the other end of the rainbow, right?
Mhm.
And you are actually helping people to not only process it, but get into their new normal. And
Mhm.
I did a interview with someone, and they were like, there's nothing normal about this. This is not a
Mm-mm.
new normal, or that's
No.
not the way they would like to think about it. And it is because they said nothing is abnormal. I mean, nothing is normal about this. But it's
Yes.
like, you know, I did it. I do understand. At the same time, you've experienced this loss, and what you thought was normal for that time. And now you're in a new part of your life, and this you have to make this part functional. So
Yeah.
everything you do from here on out is going to be your new normal,
Yeah.
but it's the abnormal. It's abnormal to the human thought process because we are letting go of something that we are always trying to hold on to, and that's another human life, or that's the human thought of it all.
Hmm.
So loss just does a whole situation on you. So when we think about where you were to where you are now, what would you say losing your husband exposed in you?
Oh gosh. Definitely strength I didn't know I had. And I know grievers hate that when people say you're so strong. And I don't like it either, to be honest with you. But I can say it about myself because, they like to say, well, I didn't have a choice. And the reality is you didn't give yourself a choice, but you actually did have a choice.
Okay.
You actually did. Like, you could have just walked away.
Yeah.
You could have but like that wasn't even a choice that you gave yourself, and you didn't do
Hmm.
that. But you actually
Yeah.
could have chose another way. So I discovered a strength that I didn't have. Like I said, I look back at what I've endured, and I just don't even, it's hard for me to comprehend still now. And I've wrote a whole book about it. Um,
Yeah.
I also know I uncovered fears I didn't know I carried. Um, I discovered my tendency to overfunction and avoid vulnerabilities and emotions that are uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and a people pleasing side of me that I didn't actually know I had.
Okay.
I've always been brutally honest, but I definitely
Yeah.
have a people pleasing side that I didn't know I had. It also exposed how deeply I love. And I mean,
Mm.
I've always been a lover, but like the the depth of my love is so much richer now.
Yeah.
And with my all of my relationships, with the relationship with my husband, the relationship with my kids, with my family, with my friends, and especially with my God,
Yeah.
because it's no longer, I've always had great faith, but it's no longer this kind of, and I don't want to, for lack of a better word, I'm going to say surface level love. And it wasn't surface level, but like I really came to a crossroads where I was like, I am so bad at you. Like, I don't know if I can keep doing this with you.
Yeah.
Um, and I rebuilt that. And so, really, how deeply I love, and how fiercely I fight for myself.
Hmm.
That
Yeah.
all was exposed in this whole situation.
Yeah. And I like how you said, the rebuilding of the relationship with yourself and God. And it's almost like you built the real relationship, right?
Yes, that's
Because
what
you
I
get
mean.
to,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's like you get to know him in a way that we all are taught to think about him. But when we have to actually live in that moment and let this wonderful big source that we've all known that we're supposed to depend on, and that's supposed to bring us all of everything, because he is the I am. When you think about that and you have to be in that moment, that's when it becomes personal. That's when it
Yes,
becomes like that real relationship, outside of thank you God for the food that we received. No, it's like
exactly.
thank you for waking me up out of my bed.
Yes.
Thank you for giving me a sane mind and being able
Yes.
to even talk and go to the bathroom today, if
Yes.
we really want to be real with it, right?
Right. Right. Where I became completely dependent on him.
Yeah, that's it.
Hmm.
That's it. If so, now we are fast forwarding and you've had a couple of years to process, because this is still relatively new for you. Even if it's been 3 years, it's 3 years is like 2 days
Yeah.
sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And so now, with that being said, I'm going to ask you, because you had so much in an identity shift, who are you?
Well, I hate this label, but I am a widow. And as much as I hate that label, I do use it because it's, in my mind, I'm still married, even though my husband isn't physically here.
Mhm.
And so if I don't say that I'm a widow, then I just feel like I'm erasing him. And I'm not okay with that. So, as much as I hate that word, I'm a widow. I'm a mom of 4 boys. I'm a certified life coach and grief coach. I'm an RN and now a best-selling author, which is so exciting to me. Um, and I am someone who has chosen to rise from the ashes
Yeah.
and to turn her pain into purpose. And I am a woman who believes that healing is possible after the most unimaginable loss and the most unimaginable circumstances There's still healing is possible. No one is too far gone. No situation is a lost cause.
Yeah, definitely. So, Kelci, tell us, what do you have coming down the pipeline? Any projects you have going on that we should look forward to? What's next in your on your journey?
Well, I would love to do, and I don't have anything set in stone yet, but I'd love to do a book tour for my book, A Million Miracles and the One That Never Came, at least in the United States. Am continuing with my coaching programs and community in Rise with Grief, and you can find out all about those on my website, which is risewithgrief.com. I've got some more exciting things in the pipeline down the works. I've got lots of big things coming up, but nothing that I can quite announce yet. So stay tuned. Stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Okay.
Stay connected to me on social media. You can sign up for my grief newsletter that I send out every week. And yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah. And I will have all of Kelci's information of ways to contact her, about her book. I think we have like your Instagram information as well.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, and also hopefully we have all your information regarding your grief coaching, how to get in touch with you if you want some clients or things of that nature. So all of her information will be in her bio under her under the podcast. So, Kelci, I want to thank you so much for coming into the shadow box and just trusting this process and telling us your story and allowing us to come into your world. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Carlise. It's been an honor to be here.
Awesome. So everyone else, thank you for coming into the shadow box. And until next time, namaste.